Hey, Eseth! Want to do a collab? I think I've got a fun one.
Are you gonna make me watch Racist again?
Not quite.
Ooh, Peddler?
Close.
Entitled Snowflake?
Closer.
Incel?
Even closer.
Tutin address?
Almost.
Holier than thou with a special pronoun or title in their Twitter bio?
In a sense, it was all of the above. We're responding to a Catholic priest.
Atheist.
Your mouth has only said one word. Your body language and facial expressions, however, have screamed, "Hi, I'm a condescending douche nozzle."
Thanks for clicking on this video. It means a lot to me, really.
Aw, shucks, don't mention it. Hey, if anything, I should be thanking you. Because if you hadn't have made your video, then I wouldn't be making this video, and then my subscribers would continue to yell at me.
I'm a religious guy who's devoted my life to a God you don't believe in, so you're taking a bit of a risk here that I might insult you, make you feel bad about your life, or at the very least, waste your time.
Waste of time, yes, but I enjoy wasting my time on making these videos, so it's time well wasted. As for being insulted, yeah, that's a risk I took, but that's a risk I take whenever I go on social media. We thankfully have enough leeway to still insult one another. A little bit if we stay within certain boundaries and don't do it very loudly. And hey, by clicking on this video, if you ever get around to doing that, you'll be risking the same thing. And then I meet that risk immediately when I call you a condescending douche nozzle within the first few seconds. Sorry about that. I didn't mean anything by it. I'm sure you're a great guy. Now, in regards to making me feel bad about my life, not to question your skill at doing that, but I find it very unlikely that there's anything you can say within the span of this 10-minute video that 14 years of Catholic schooling hasn't well prepared me to hear.
I really do appreciate it, and I hope not to do any of those things here.
I'm pretty sure atheists who click on a video titled An Open Letter to Atheists from a Priest either expect that you might have a different belief that might insult them, or make them feel bad, or waste their time, or whatever, or they are not sober enough. In which case they wouldn't be sober enough to understand the apology either. Also, when you're trying to tackle an audience that is of an opposing side compared to yours, and you act as though they need a comfort blanket, that doesn't really show you in the best of lights. It may sound funny, or even in part be accurate, but it doesn't help your credibility. Nor would it particularly sway people on any sort of hypothetical fence. It usually has the contrary effect.
Rather, I'd like to pose a question to you. It's a very simple question, in fact. It is more of an exhortation from me to you. This question is not meant to trick you or convert you. I don't have some super ingenious question that will somehow inspire faith in a deity, as much as I'd love to. I'd rather just like to challenge you. You say that you're an atheist, that you don't believe in gods, and I just want to know one thing. Are you a good one?
The best. No one disbelieves in God better than I do. Not Dawkins, not Harris, not the 9-year-olds chained up in the basement of the Vatican, and they have a really good reason not to believe in God. That's how good of an atheist I am.
Are you a good atheist?
What does that even mean? Believing or not believing in something doesn't make you inherently anything other than a person who believes or doesn't believe. Is an atheist who doesn't believe there is a God from the deepest bottom of his heart a good atheist? Or is an atheist who doesn't think there is a God and doesn't really care all that much a bad atheist? I mean, you may choose to adhere to a particular doctrine, you may choose to adhere to it very, very rigidly, and in that regard you could call yourself good, I suppose, but that has little to do with how much you believe something, and far more to do with how much you fit in the standard that said dogma advertises. In fact, if that is your standard for what is good and bad, then I bet there are a lot of atheists who would score very, very high on the good believer list in spite of having zero belief in your deity.
is a question that I ask with two things in mind. The first being related to morality. While religion in general, and Christianity in particular, doesn't necessarily make someone a moral person, these ways of life do necessarily demand morality of adherence.
I disagree with that notion. And I suspect you would disagree with that notion as well, in regards to the religions that you are not a part of. Religions do not demand morality of their adherents. Rather, they demand the morality of adherence. Morality, in this sense, is adhering to the rules of the religion, and religions have mutually exclusive rules. As a Catholic, you would find many religions to be foundationally immoral, because they're venerating gods that you don't believe in, or are venerating the God you do believe in ways you disapprove of. What's the greatest sin anyone can commit from the perspective of a Catholic? It would be to blaspheme against God, which is not only something I do, but something that everyone who isn't Catholic does. If non-Christian faiths call upon their adherents to commit what you would consider to be the most egregious sin, can you still call those faiths moral?
There is a particular code of life that one must live.
Yeah, a particular code of adherence, or group cohesion to put it more bluntly. And the fact of the matter is that any sort of top-down dogmatic system demands cohesion, regardless of whether that sort of cohesion is based on thou shalt not sin or thou shalt not misgender. If you stick to the rules, you're considered good by your co-believers, and if you don't, you're considered bad. It is one of the oldest and most common tricks in the book. Christianity, or any other faith for that matter, doesn't have a monopoly on that. And the thing that annoys me the most about these sort of dogmatic frameworks is that their code is passed on without any reasoning behind it. For example, thou shalt honor thy parents. Why? Well, because God says so. What if they're horrible people? Well, thou shalt still honor them. But compare that with the following approach. In the vast majority of cases, parents try their best to provide for their children and raise them into a healthy and good-willed human being. By acknowledging that sentiment and respecting your parents for their efforts, you tend to take a much more mature and neutral stance towards them. And that can be beneficial for them and for you, because an adult openly considering the pros and cons of a parent's advice is far more capable of making use of their experience than an emotionally overseasoned teenager who isn't paying attention. But I got completely sidetracked here. I'm sorry. The claim is that there is a code and we need to adhere to it to be good. And I will interpret good here as positively influencing your surrounding, because usually that is what it refers to. And that statement is false. Your ability to lead a life that has a positive impact on your fellow human beings is not based on what dogma you follow, it is based on how you interact with your fellow human beings.
In the case of Catholic Christianity, that code is one of peace and justice, mercy and forgiveness. It's a code that seeks to care for the poor and seek reparations for those who take advantage of the vulnerable.
In other words, the code of Catholic Christianity is based on internal contradictions. What do you mean by internal contradictions? Well, mercy and justice are mutually exclusive. You're either just, meaning you dish out proportionate punishment for the committed crimes, or you're merciful and lenient, and as a result, the victims constantly get the short end of the stick, and not justice. You can't have it both ways.
Now, Lord knows we don't always live up to our founder and have actually done some pretty atrocious things through the years.
If you don't live up to your code and did atrocious things, then your code was either flawed or didn't work. That is not really an endorsement for it, is it?
Now, Lord knows we don't always live up to our founder and have actually done some pretty atrocious things through the years, but it is our faith that at least informs us when we do these things and gives us and reminds us a moral code to live by.
Your faith informs you when you do atrocious things. I don't know if that's what you meant to say. in that last sentence, or if that was just an unfortunate phrasing. But it's true, you see, is the problem. Is that, yes, people have, in fact, used faith to guide them in the pursuit of ends that we would find atrocious. Faith informed the parent who decided to mutilate the genitalia of their newborn. Faith informed the suicide bomber who decided to go off in the middle of a crowded theater. Faith informed the patient who decided to decline a life-saving blood transfusion. Perhaps you can see how at least our decisions are informed by faith doesn't hold a lot of persuasive power to me. Now, you've described Catholic Christianity's code in a very PR-friendly way. What with you being pro-mercy, peace, and the poor, these are things that one would not find particularly contentious things to champion. But I can't help but feel you are trying to slide in a bit too much when you claim to be pro-justice. As with many groups that advocate for various kinds of justice, Catholic justice has some contentious aspects to it that you have seemingly glossed over, including, but not limited to, the validity of substitutional atonement and the justifiability of eternal punishment.
Reminds us that it's not an option. We must strive to be good people.
Father, you're a Catholic. Immorality isn't just a mere option for you. It's the default. It's the constant. You were born immoral, everything you do is immoral, and it is only through the grace of God that you get the immorality scrubbed off of you. If I may direct your attention to the video you made directly after this one.
A few years ago, I found myself struggling with a couple habitual sins. I went to confession each time and shared my sorrow. How many times can you really confess the same thing? At what point is God going to look at me and say, "You're abusing the sacrament, you're taking my grace for granted"? So, what did I do, you ask? I avoided the sacrament. I said to myself, I gotta get serious about this. I'm gonna prove it to God and myself that I'm committed to change, and so until I go a whole month without committing these sins, I'm just not gonna go back to confession. 9 months later, I finally got tired of failing and went back to confession. He said, "So, let me get this straight. You were struggling with sin, and you thought the best course of action was to stay away from the sacraments, to give less time to God? How'd that work out for you?" "Not well, Father. No, not well."
You attempted to take responsibility for your actions and strive for self-betterment, and then gave up on that. And of course you did. Why wouldn't you? God's well of forgiveness is bottomless. Sinning limitlessly and unchangingly is an option in Catholicism, and the priests are aware of that. I wonder if that informs any of their behaviors.
Now, as someone who doesn't have this foundation, who doesn't believe in a God or adhere to a religion, there is no superstructure making this demand on your life. No one telling you how to live in certain situations.
Motherfucker, are you actually going to make me say we live in a society? Alright, fine. No, I cannot live my life without regard to how it impacts others, because we live in a society. Society is the superstructure that makes demands on me and my behavior, and if I try to go against society, I will find that my quality of life drops drastically.
Well, that is all true, Auntie, but I feel like there is more to say than that. Because while it is true that society has a massive impact on people's behavior, it does so in a very trial and error kind of way. You have to first make mistakes in order to be able to improve yourself, and improve yourself in order to grasp how it works. It doesn't necessarily supply a strategy or framework to apply when dealing with society. And I often have the impression that that is the reason why so many ex-believers get dragged into cults so easily after they left the first one. Preset rules and black and white groupthink are just easy and comforting for people who are used to them. But the reason why many atheists, especially the ones who were raised in a non-dogmatic household, have zero problems to go through life without such preset dogmas is because they have learned to extrapolate valuable principles from society all by themselves and are able to apply them appropriately. It's like a superpower. A think for yourself superpower. It's great. You really get addicted to it once you go into it, I swear. It's like sugar.
Without a belief in an afterlife, there might be a feeling that all the world is futile, so what difference does it make?
The difference it makes occurs during the time you're alive. And if you don't believe in an afterlife, that is in fact the only time you have.
This, of course, does not need to be the case. Some of the world's greatest humanitarians, some of the most influential figures today promoting peace and justice efforts, are not adherents to a religion, but live morally out of a commitment to humanity, a recognition of our interconnectedness, an acknowledgement that there is something good in itself about loving one another, about sacrifice.
Do you mean to tell me that I can be a good person and an atheist? Oh my god, that changes everything. I need to clear my calendar of all the murder and rape I had planned.
And so I ask you, are you a good atheist? Even though there may be no eternal reward or punishment, even though you're free to do whatever you want.
Yeah, but we're not, though. We cohabitate with millions of other people, all of whom comprise society. And society will select for behaviors it finds desirable, and select against behaviors it finds undesirable. It is a lot like evolution in that way. Another superstructure you have neglected to mention, but that also impacts what I want and how I behave. Whether or not I agree with the products of any particular society is neither here nor there. I'm only here to point out that I am not, as you say, free to do whatever I'd like. For example, in some parts of the world, namely the parts where religion is the society, I could not even freely be an atheist. I could be an atheist freely swinging from a lamppost, but that's not quite what I mean. While you might be stressing the importance of eternal rewards and punishments, religions understand the value of earthly incentives, and make no bones about employing those methods when those options are available to them.
Do you choose the virtuous path that benefits not only you, but others? I hope so.
The way you phrase it, it nearly sets up a false dichotomy. A dichotomy where you either have a virtuous moral code, or you're prone to just, go around and ransack and purge and whatnot. But the fact of the matter is that you have a massive amount of people who subscribe to such a dogma code, but then either ignore it or actively use it to cause damage to the people they disapprove of. And you have a massive amount of people who couldn't care less about dogmas, and they still do superb work for their community. So the code didn't really do all that much, by the looks of it. And you even admit that yourself. So what exactly are you trying to achieve with this question? What are you trying to tell us? Because so far, I just didn't get the memo.
The world needs good atheists. Now, of course, the word good points to more than just a sense of morality. It also represents an evaluation of aptitude. When I ask if you're a good atheist, I want to know if you're good at being an atheist.
Whoa. What kind of bait and switch is that all of a sudden? All this time, we talked about being a good person and a good human, and then now you jump into, do you believe? Are these two things somehow interchangeable in your head? Do you really need to passionately believe in Fluffy the reindeer dog in order to help Granny carry her groceries around? Unreal.
Do you articulate why you don't believe in God in a coherent way, or you just think that religion's dumb, so use logical fallacies?
No, I simply have faith that God does not exist. Now, one might hear that and think that I had failed to articulate in a clear, coherent way why I disbelieve, as faith is not a sufficient justification for either belief or disbelief. And that person would be right. That person had better not be you, though, Father, lest you draw attention to the fact that you are holding atheists to a different standard than you are holding everyone else.
Have you explored the depths of your mind and heart, asking the real questions of life, of death, faith and reason, seeking to understand what this human life is really about?
Let's ignore for a moment the fact that when we tried to establish what you understand under good, it sort of went all over the place. And let us instead help you out here for a second. Because you see, you have a very, very big problem. You speak the wrong language. And I don't mean English. I mean that you speak Catholic. In order to explore the depths of your heart, you have to assume that there is stuff, outside of anatomy of course, that you can explore inside of your heart. Likewise, the real questions of life and death, faith and reason, are massively culture-specific, or in this case, dogma-specific. For example, a religious person such as yourself might find a great deal of emotional satisfaction pondering about your particular God and all sorts of spiritual thoughts and faith and reinforcements and whatnot. But to a person like me, these thoughts not only don't have this sort of effect, they partially don't even compute. I mean, let's take faith. Why does faith feel good to you? Why is it a virtuous thing? To me, faith is a side effect from letting my guard down. If I catch myself taking things on faith, they're either irrelevant or I have failed to use my brain. To me, it is virtuous to avoid faith. So when you say things like, have you asked real questions about faith? You're basically asking the equivalent of, have you thought profoundly about the washing of your dishes? It makes no sense to me. And I get the whole, ponder about your life part. A person who finds value in non-material things and has a meaningful goal in his life has a much easier time to get through life and to enjoy it. But these are questions that don't have a one-size-fits-all solution. Not in Christianity, not in any other religion, and not among atheists either. There are also questions that often require a lot of time, which many, especially people who work several full-time jobs and don't live rent-free in a cloister, don't necessarily have. And I'm sorry, but not brain squirreling around about life and the universe, in my opinion, doesn't make you a bad Christian or a bad atheist.
Have you explored the depths of your mind and heart, asking the real questions of life, of death, faith and reason, seeking to understand what this human life is really about? You just not want to go to church, so this'll do.
Who is the intended audience for this video? Look, I know it says it's an open letter to atheists, but when your proposed reasoning for disbelief includes things like, oh, I just don't want to go to church, and religion is dumb, you do not conjure the image of an atheist who has spent any degree of time thinking about religious questions, and an atheist of that level of apathy is unlikely to have even found your video. This comes off less like an attempt to reach out to non-believers as it does an attempt to cling on to waning believers. Like you're speaking to Catholic teens who are now too old for their parents to drag to church, so they opt to sleep in on Sundays. And I do not appreciate when a video ostensibly directed to me is actually veiled marketing. Now, I do realize that this is me being quite uncharitable. Yep, I realize it. I'm not apologizing or taking it back, but I do realize it.
Have you read the critical atheist thinkers of history? People like Nietzsche, Sartre, Feuerbach, Heidegger, people who really ask the challenging questions, who pose thoughtful insights of the world. Or just stick with people like Richard Dawkins, people who provide great sound bites for the cause, yippee, but do little to add anything to the world other than strawman arguments and divisiveness.
Whew, that was a close one. Man, I thought I gave up the high ground with my last comment, but man, you dived right into this pit with me. Now I don't need to feel bad. You can snipe at Dawkins all you'd like, but let's not pretend he hasn't provided any thoughtful insight to the world. The selfish gene is such an insight. Knowing the role genes play in how you behave and how you're made is a crucial component in understanding what this human life is really about, to paraphrase you. Whether you think he's a competent philosopher or atheist spokesperson is irrelevant. What he is a published author who has immeasurably expanded the public's understanding of evolution and microbiology.
Ugh! The thing that rubs me the wrongest about this is that somehow it implies that either of these people are necessary. You don't need Nietzsche to think that the credo in the Holy Trinity of Father, Son, and Holy Church is bonkers. And you don't need Dawkins to think that the Holy Trinity is bonkers either. Especially the Holy Church part in it. That one is just completely weird.
Have you read for yourself the works of real theologians, people articulating our beliefs in the best way we know how? Karl Rahner, John Henry Newman, Joseph Ratzinger.
Did you just say Ratzinger?
Joseph Ratzinger.
Not to be nitpicky, but don't you think that it is a bit weird that you were just taking a jab at Richard Dawkins for not being up to your standard, while you encourage people to read the scribblings of Ratzinger, you know, the Pope who was in the Hitler Youth, and conveniently resigned during an intriguing money disappearance investigation, and who was also accused for transferring to safety several priests who were under investigation for certain YouTube unfriendly misconduct concerning minor choir boys. I mean, don't get me wrong, you can read and like whatever you like, but I'm not sure Ratzinger is a smart PR move.
Augustine of Hippo, Henri de Lubac? Or do you stick with the simplicity of evangelical pastors from some rural anti-intellectual church? I ask all of this not to be accusatory, at least not overly accusatory, but to simply challenge you to go deeper in your thought.
Be accusatory all you like with me, priesty. But quite frankly, being accused of not reading the brain whirls that you believe show your faith in the best light is not much of an accusation. You see, if you want me to entertain your dogma, it's your job to present the sophisticated thoughts and arguments to advertise your dogma. It is not my job to do your job for you. Likewise, if I wanted to advertise my ideas to you, I would be the one who has to sway you, and not demand from you to read all sorts of weird books that I happen to find compelling.
Simply declaring yourself an atheist and going about your life isn't enough, just as saying you're a Christian and never reading the Bible wouldn't be enough.
Well, according to the rationality you just outlined, not even reading the Bible is enough to be a good Christian. You have a bunch of theologians you need to slog through before you can aptly call yourself a Christian. How many members of your congregation do you insist read all of these works before you can say their faith is justified? Moreover, I noticed that your list of theologians was rather sparse. You did not include Ramanuja, Al-Muardi, L. Ron Hubbard, or Joseph Smith. You seem to be forgetting that there are religions other than Catholicism competing for people's attention. How can one consider themselves a good Christian if they haven't analyzed the works of Hinduism or Islam? If all you need to do to be a good Christian is read the Bible, it is comparatively easy to be a good Christian and not at all easy to be a good atheist. Also, did you guys know that Ramanuja lived to be 120 years old? He was born in the 11th century. I found this out while looking up the names of random Hindu theologians I could throw in for the previous segment, and that struck me as quite remarkable. Man, maybe there's something to Hinduism.
Ask more questions. Read more perspectives. Be able to articulate your understanding of the world with logic and reasoning that will actually add something to the world. Because here's the thing. People of faith need you to be good atheists. We do.
I disagree. People of faith need good atheists about as urgently as someone sitting in a plane needs diarrhea. You can create yourself in the belief that the faith of the faithful gets stronger and more sophisticated the more they are exposed to counter-arguments, but in reality, most people have neither the time nor the will to bother. When exposed to an atheist, they get either riddled with doubts and then eventually see their world crumble in front of their eyes, or maybe they give it a second thought and then just don't bother again and move on with their lives without caring any further, because they have lives. The people who feel like their belief gets stronger by these sorts of exchanges are very, very few and far between. I also disagree with you on your add to the world idea. If you really want to add something to the world, then add something to the world. A scientist who develops an innovative system to make life easier adds something to the world. A farmer farming food that other people then can eat adds something to the world. A doctor taking care of patients adds also something to the world. Heck, even by offering some homeless people a pizza, you add something to the world. And all of these things, in my opinion, are far more add to the world worthy than sitting around for hours to read fancy brain twirls and then sit around for hours with you to brain twirl to you so that you can get better at brain twirling back. That, in comparison, seems a bit of a waste of time.
As a Christian, I don't want you to be a bad atheist with an unexplored mind just regurgitating fallacies.
No, you want me to be an atheist that needs to expend a disproportionate amount of effort justifying atheism. You challenge atheists and don't challenge Catholics, and you presume this to be the strategy to produce more Catholics. As you may have noticed, my well of charity has run dry.
I want you to ask questions that we've never thought to answer. I want you to be so smart that it challenges us to be smarter. As crazy as it sounds, I would much rather you be a good atheist than just an atheist.
You heard them, guys. Be good atheists. Actually, be bad atheists. Be evil atheists. Hell needs you. Banter aside, I do agree with him on one thing, though. It is better to be a person who thinks for himself rather than being the usual copy-paste person who gobbles up the arguments and ideas without actually giving it much thought or even understanding them. It's just not a healthy thing to do for anyone. It's dogmatic, and we wouldn't really want to be dogmatic. After all, we wouldn't want to look like believers, would we?
And so that is my humble message to you, from one believer to a non-believer. We may not agree on much, but that doesn't mean that we don't need each other or can't learn something from one another. We do, and we can. Peace and good to you, Father Casey.
You might prefer I be a good atheist to a bad atheist, but any variant of atheist is still less desirable than even a bad Catholic.
That was so refreshing.
That was almost nostalgic. Reminiscent of the olden days of YouTube.
Yeah, the good old days. All edgy and fun. But you know what, Auntie? For as fun as this was, I don't think that this video quite hit the spot yet. We should try doing something a little different.
That's so. Got something in mind, do you?
Well, now that you mention it...
So if you are really sensitive to the sun, odds are if you eat more plants in a high quality, then the more you'll be able to transmute the energy of light into life force.
Oh, God.
See that, Casey? That's how you make Christians. Thank you all for watching. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe. And if you feel very naughty, why don't you share it around a bit? And see if there are other people who might like my content, who wanna be naughty with you. Or tell me in the comment section how much you agree that this friar shows too much skin in his hypersexualized 3/4 sleeves. Why not subscribe to the email list at list.logic.com and be one of the first to get the videos. You could also join my Discord channel or support me on Patreon, PayPal, or Subscribestar. You should also definitely hop over to Anti-Sleeper's channel, follow him, and tell him he's a lazy son of questionable origins. I wish you all a great evening, and I hope to see you soon.